Welcome to my channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and like. The Kale 7 archive station hung suspended in the darkness of a forgotten star system, a heart of steel beating slowly within the cosmic chest. No roaring engines echoed through its halls, no blinding lights pierced the void. Only the faint pulse of bioluminescent walls flickered, glowing in rhythm with a dream no one remembered. The air was cold, laced with the scent of aged metal and the faint, withered trace of decayed vegetation, as if the station itself were struggling to breathe through centuries of abandonment. Kale, a human archivist, moved through a narrow corridor, his anti-static boots gliding silently over the dust-covered metal floor. His black, form-fitting suit was designed to leave no trace, no fingerprints, no breath, not even a stray fragment of memory. His eyes, hidden behind analytical lenses, flickered with streams of data scanning temperature, particle traces, and the lingering echoes of emotions trapped in the ether. He didn't belong here, not in the way the engineers or administrators had centuries ago when Kale 7 thrived. Yet here he was, bound by an unspoken oath, to ensure no story was ever erased. The corridor led to the quarantine sector, a labyrinth of cold metal cells where living relics were stored. Not to be revered, but to be dissected, their essence reduced to data for distant scientists. The cells were digital coffins, housing the last remnants of extinct or useless species. Before cell 392C, a control panel flashed a stark red, its light cutting through the dimness. Words appeared on the screen, cold and precise. Zenari species, female specimen, classification C4. Suboptimal pelvic structure for reproduction. Status, specimen designated for disposal. Kale paused, his breath catching in his chest. No name, only a code, as if the life within deserved no more. He had read thousands of such records, each a sterile verdict on a soul deemed unworthy. But this time, something stirred. His fingers brushed the control panel, and a strange sensation rippled down his spine, as if the very space whispered secrets to him. He activated the release mechanism. Gears groaned, and the metal door slid open, revealing a small chamber bathed in faint violet light, where a figure sat huddled in the corner. She wasn't truly huddled. Her posture was a delicate balance of defense and defiance, like a wounded predator ready to strike. Her arms crossed over her chest, knees drawn close, her silver eyes gleaming like twin stars trapped in darkness. Her skin shimmered with a pale blue hue, reflecting the light like ice on a frozen lake. Long black hair, glossy as polished graphite, cascaded over her shoulders, each strand a silent story untold. The thin linen garment, issued to specimens thawed from cryosleep, clung to her frame, doing nothing to highlight her spirit. But she didn't need it. Her presence, though suppressed, radiated a vitality that refused to be extinguished. She raised her head, her gaze locking onto Kale with unyielding intensity. Not fear, but vigilance, sharp as a honed blade. "Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse, unused for years, yet each word cut through the silence, precise and deliberate. "Kale," he answered, his voice low and steady, a calm anchor in the stillness. He didn't approach, standing at the threshold, observing her as he would a priceless artifact, not to possess, but to understand. "I'm an archivist." "For what?" She tilted her head, her silver eyes glinting with icy skepticism. "To measure me again? To decide if I'm worth keeping?" Kale shook his head, slowly removing his left glove to reveal a calloused hand, etched with faint scars from missions never recorded. He sat on the cold metal floor, a few meters away, pressing his bare palm against the surface, as if grounding himself in the station's forgotten soul. "I'm here to listen." She scoffed, the sound dry as wind over a barren desert. "Listen?" she repeated, her tone laced with disbelief. They listened. The Zenari scientists, the breeders, the ethicists with their styluses and data pads. They listened while measuring my bones, calculating my reproductive efficiency, and concluding I was a mistake. "I'm not here to measure," Kale said, his gaze unwavering, steady as a star. "I'm here to see." She fell silent, her eyes drifting to his bare hand on the floor. Something in that gesture, An unspoken invitation made her hesitate. "Do you know my name?" she asked, her voice softer, tinged with a challenge, as if testing his sincerity. "No," he admitted, his honesty unguarded. "But I want to." She frowned, as if kindness were an alien concept, untrustworthy. "Lyra," she said at last, the name escaping like a long-buried secret, a gem hidden in shadow. "They called me Lyra, before they decided I didn't deserve a name." Cale nodded, as if the name were a vital piece of the universe's puzzle. "Lyra," he echoed, his voice gentle, testing its weight in the quiet. "Why are you here, Lyra?" She turned away, her dark hair veiling part of her face, a shield against unseen wounds. "They said my body was wrong," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "My pelvis too wide, its angle misaligned. I didn't fit the Zenari reproductive standard. They had no use for what couldn't be optimized." Cale didn't respond immediately. He watched her, not with pity, a sentiment she would surely despise, but with a deep curiosity, as if she were a riddle he longed to unravel with his heart, not his tools. "And what do you think about that?" he asked, his voice carrying a genuine interest, free of judgment. The question made her snap her head up, her silver eyes flashing like lightning. No one had ever asked what she thought. No one had cared. "I think—" She paused, her voice trembling, as if wrestling with buried emotions. "I think I want to know if they were right." Cale leaned forward, not close enough to intrude, but enough for her to feel his presence, a quiet strength in the dimness. "I can help you find that answer," he said, his voice steady, a promise unspoken. "If you'll let me." Lyra's brow furrowed, her gaze probing, searching for deceit. "How?" she asked, her tone sharp with suspicion. "I read memories," Cale said, his voice calm, as if stating a simple truth. "Not from machines, but from the body, from what lingers in bone, in skin, in the pulse of a heart. If you allow it." She fell silent, her eyes flickering between doubt and a desperate yearning. At last, she slowly lowered her arms, revealing a sliver of her body beneath the thin linen. She didn't remove her garment, only lifted it enough to expose the curve of her hip, the part deemed flawed by her creators. "Touch here," she said, her voice almost a command, yet laced with a tremor, as if offering a piece of herself. "And tell me what I am." Cale moved with reverence, as if approaching a sacred relic. He knelt before her, his bare hand resting on her hip, gentle as if touching something fragile yet eternal. As his fingers met her cold skin, a torrent of memories surged, sharp and merciless, pulling him into her past. Visions flooded Cale's mind like a storm. Cold hands of Zenari scientists probed Lyra's body on a sterile metal table, needles piercing her abdomen, a mechanical voice droning, pelvic angle deviation, 19 degrees. Non-optimal. Designate for disposal. She lay restrained, metal straps biting into her wrists, blinding white light searing her eyes. Faceless figures loomed above, their hands not comforting but condemning. A woman's voice, sharp as a blade, declared, "This specimen is unfit for reproduction. Process for termination." Cale felt her pain, not just the physical sting of needles, but the deeper wound, the shattering of her sense of self. She had been taught her body was a machine, engineered to serve the Zenari species. When it failed their metrics, she was discarded, a broken tool unworthy of repair. Yet another memory flickered, fragile but warm, like a candle in the dark. An elderly woman with silver hair pressed a small purple flower into Lyra's hand, whispering, "You're still alive, Lyra. Don't forget that." Cale withdrew his hand, his breath heavy, as if he'd run through an endless corridor. Lyra stared at him, her silver eyes glistening with unshed tears, yet she refused to let them fall. "What did you see?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute. "I saw someone treated as a number," Cale said, his voice steady, a quiet declaration. "But I also saw someone who never stopped fighting, even to simply exist." She gave a faint, bitter laugh, but her eyes softened, the ice within them thawing. "Fighting?" she echoed. "I was just trying to survive. Sometimes, that's the same thing." Kale replied, his gaze unwavering. He stood, but his eyes remained on her. You're not a mistake, Lyra. They were wrong to think they could define you. She didn't respond, her gaze dropping to her body, her hand brushing the thin linen as if searching for some hidden worth. Suddenly, a faint hiss broke the silence, emanating from the control panel outside. A red light pulsed, not from Lyra's cell, but from another source. Kale turned, his analytical lenses flaring with an alert, intrusion signal detected. Unidentified activity in southern sector. He said nothing, but his body tensed, like a predator poised for action. Lyra noticed the shift in his stance, her silver eyes narrowing. What's wrong? She asked, her voice low, alert. We're not alone, Kale replied, his tone sharp, cutting through the stillness. Someone's searching. She sprang to her feet, her bare soles meeting the cold floor with a soft thud. They're here for me, aren't they? She asked, her voice steady, but laced with a flicker of dread. Kale didn't answer immediately. He activated a scan through the neural interface at his temple, a faint blue glow pulsing as data flooded his vision. A narrow signal, precise and deliberate, bore the mark of a Zenari Council directive, Specimen C4, Lyra. Retrieve or eliminate. No, Kale said, turning to her, his eyes hard as steel. They won't touch you. Lyra stepped forward, her gaze no longer wary but blazing with resolve. If they come, she said, her voice a vow, I won't let them take me alive. Kale grasped her hand, the first time he touched her without reading memories. His warmth contrasted with her cold skin, a silent promise. They won't take you, he said, his voice a solemn oath. Not while I'm here. They left the cell, the dark corridor swallowing their forms. The bioluminescent walls flickered, as if the station itself sensed the approaching danger. Kale led the way, his right hand clutching a small scanning device, his left holding Lyra's. She didn't pull away, and that small act of trust made his heart beat faster. It was the first sign she believed in him, even if only a little. They halted at a junction where the corridor split into 3 paths, each a deeper maze within the station. Kale scanned quickly, detecting a signal moving 300 meters away, too swift to be human. Hunter drone, he whispered, his voice a warning. No sentience, just programming. It won't stop. Lyra tightened her grip on his hand, her fingers cold but firm. I know them, she said, her voice edged with bitterness. The Council uses them to clean up things like me. Kale met her gaze, his eyes fierce. You're not a thing to be cleaned up. He guided her into a side passage, where rusted thermal pipes radiated faint warmth, like the dying breath of a machine. They moved swiftly, but not in panic, Kale's steps sure, as if he'd fled through shadows before. He activated a decoy protocol, projecting dozens of false biosignals across the station's cells, confounding the drone's sensors. This will buy us time, he said, his voice steady but taut. But not much. They reached an old control chamber, where monitors flickered weakly, casting pale light on dust-covered walls. Kale plugged his neural interface into the central console, his fingers dancing through the air, rewriting the station's data. He wasn't just hacking, he was erasing Lyra's existence, turning her into a ghost in the archives. But as he finished, a new signal flared on the screen, sharp and ominous. Not a drone. A small, swift spacecraft had entered the station's orbit, bearing the Zenari Council's signature. Kale cursed under his breath, a low, sharp sound. They didn't just send drones, he said, his voice tight. Someone's coming. Lyra stood tall, her eyes sharp as blades. The Zenari Council never abandons its property, she said, her voice laced with defiance. You're not property, Kale snapped, his tone bordering on anger, as if her words wounded him. And I won't let them take you. She looked at him, and for the first time, her gaze held no suspicion, only a flicker of something new, trust, fragile but growing. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice soft, almost a whisper. You don't know me. Kale paused, his hands still on the console, his eyes shadowed by memories. Because I once let someone be erased from this universe, he said, his voice heavy with unspoken pain. I won't let it happen again. Lyra didn't press further. She nodded, as if his words were enough, as if she understood wounds didn't need to be voiced to be felt. They left the control chamber, heading for the atmospheric dock, where an ancient, dust-covered rescue ship lay dormant. But as they neared, a sharp metallic screech echoed behind them. The drone had found them. Cale pushed Lyra behind him, drawing an electromagnetic pulse device from his belt, its faint blue glow pulsing. Run! He shouted, his voice cutting through the air. But Lyra didn't run. She stood her ground, seizing a metal rod from the debris and raising it like a weapon, her stance fierce. I won't let you fight alone, she said, her voice unwavering. The drone charged, its bipedal chrome form gleaming, its red sensor eyes sweeping over them like lasers. Cale triggered the pulse, a surge of energy halting the drone for a fleeting moment, its circuits sizzling. They sprinted to the dock, slamming the metal door behind them. But the pounding of metal on metal signaled the drone's relentless pursuit. Cale leaped to the rescue ship's controls, starting the engines. They groaned, like a beast roused from slumber, smoke and heat rising from ancient conduits. Will it work? Lyra asked, her voice taut, her eyes fixed on the door. It has to, Cale replied, his hands flying over the controls, his focus absolute. We're out of options. As the engines roared to life, a deafening explosion shook the dock. The drone had breached the door, its chrome form looming in the shadows, red eyes blazing. Lyra gripped Cale's hand, her silver eyes alight with something new, not fear, but hope, fierce and unyielding. If we die, she said, her voice a vow, I want to die fighting. We won't die, Cale said, his gaze locked on hers, a promise as vast as the stars. The ship lurched free, soaring into the black void, leaving the drone and Cale's 7 behind in the silence of a forgotten system. The rescue ship shuddered violently, a living beast wrestling to escape death's blade as it tore through the dense atmosphere of an abandoned moon. Starlight, faint as the universe's whispered secrets, glimmered through the scratched, dust-streaked viewport, casting fleeting shadows across the cramped cockpit. Within, the air was thick with the acrid tang of scorched metal and stale engine oil, as if the ship exhaled memories of forgotten voyages. Lyra sat curled in the passenger seat, bare feet propped on its edge, her silver eyes locked on the control panel with a cold intensity. On the screen, Cale input coordinates for an uncharted sector, numbers dancing like a wordless hymn guiding them into the dark. She didn't ask where he was taking them. She didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't a frigid void but an invisible thread, woven from shared moments, the fleeting touch on Cale's 7's icy metal floor, the glance exchanged as a hunter drone charged. It was an unspoken vow, needing no words, that they would face this darkness together. Cale didn't look at her, yet he felt her presence, a second heartbeat in his chest, fierce and unyielding. His hands moved across the controls, adjusting navigation systems to mask the ship's trail in the vast cosmos. Each action was a cautious dance, as if he were rewriting their fate among the stars. We need a place to hide, he said, his voice low, a steady pulse amid the engine's groans. A black station off the grid. No one will find us there. Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on the screen, as if searching for a sign within the soulless numbers. The Zanari Council doesn't give up, she said, her voice soft but bitter. They'll send more drones. Or worse, hunters. Cale's fingers froze on the controls. He turned, his deep blue eyes locking onto hers, probing the invisible armor she'd built around herself. Hunters? He asked, his voice sharp with curiosity, yet laced with caution. She shrugged, a gesture almost indifferent, but her eyes were razor-sharp, like a blade honed to perfection. Zanari trained to track escaped specimens, she explained, her tone even but heavy with weight. Not just machines. They're fanatics, believing their species' perfection lies in purging those like me, those who fail their standards. Cale leaned toward her, his gaze unwavering, as if etching every contour of her face into his memory. They're wrong, Lyra, he said, his voice resolute, a declaration against the void. You're not something to be purged. You're a being, and you belong to yourself. She laughed, a sound sharp as ice cracking on a frozen lake, yet softened by a trace of warmth, as if his words had brushed a hidden corner of her soul. You say that like I should believe it, she said, her silver eyes flashing with wry irony. But I've lived my whole life with numbers proving otherwise. Measurements, data tables, the Zenari Council's verdicts, all saying I'm a mistake. Kale rose, stepping closer, each footfall gentle yet firm, as if approaching something sacred. He knelt before her seat, resting his hands on the armrests, not touching her but letting her feel his presence, warm and steadfast in the ship's cold confines. Then let me show you, he said, his voice soft but imbued with unyielding strength. You're not a number. You're Lyra. She met his gaze, her silver eyes wavering, as if standing at a threshold she'd never dared cross. You don't know me, Kale, she whispered, her voice trembling, as if offering a piece of herself. Not really. I know enough, he replied, his eyes never leaving hers, deep and sincere. I know you've survived what no one should endure. I know you're still here, despite their attempts to erase you. That's something no number can measure. Lyra fell silent, her gaze drifting to his hands on the armrests, faint scars mapping battles fought and survived. Slowly she raised her hand, her cold fingers brushing his cheek, not to test, but to explore, as if trying to comprehend the kindness he offered. I don't know how to trust kindness, she whispered, her voice fading into the air. Not when it comes from a human. Kale smiled faintly, a gentle curve devoid of weakness, his eyes blazing like a star in the dark. Then let me teach you, he said, and in that moment the ship's cramped confines seemed to expand, as if the universe itself paused to listen. They landed on a black station at the galaxy's edge, a twisted heap of metal perched precariously on the jagged stone of a lifeless planet. Once a bustling mining outpost, alive with the hum of machines and ambition, it was now a hollow husk, abandoned when its resources ran dry. The air inside was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and rust, like the breath of a machine long dead. The oxygen system still functioned, but faintly its soft hiss a reminder that life here was fleeting. Kale checked the equipment, moving with the precision of one accustomed to harsh environments. He scanned the radar, activated security sensors, ensuring the station was safe for refuge. Lyra followed, silent but vigilant, her eyes sweeping every shadowed corner, braced for an ambush. Trust was foreign to her, her guard rarely lowered, yet Kale's steady presence sparked something new, a fragile spark of hope, delicate but resilient. In the days that followed, they carved out a makeshift existence, two wanderers surviving in the dark. Kale repaired the heating system, coaxing faint warmth from the icy air, enough to fend off the bone-deep chill. He revived the hydroponic beds, coaxing tiny green sprouts from ancient metal trays, their vibrant hues a stark contrast to the station's monotony. Lyra, unaccustomed to manual labor, joined him, learning to sow seeds and check water lines, simple acts that stirred an unfamiliar sensation, the feeling of creating, not being judged. Moments passed in silence, filled only by the clink of metal and their mingled breaths. Yet the silence wasn't heavy. It was a space where they learned each other, wordless, without grandiose promises. Each glance, each small gesture, Kale handing her a tray of seeds, Lyra's fingers brushing his while checking a pipe, formed pieces of a bond, growing slowly but surely. One night, as light from a distant supernova streamed through the window, bathing the station in a silvery glow, Lyra sat beside Kale on an old metal bench, its cold surface warmed by their closeness. She held a small hydroponic flower, pale purple, its delicate petals radiant, mirroring the bloom from her memory, the one given by the silver-haired woman, a reminder of life. She said these flowers prove we're alive. Lyra murmured, her voice dreamy, as if speaking to herself. I'd forgotten what that feels like, to live, not just exist. Kale gazed at her, his eyes soft but devoid of pity, filled with a reverence as if beholding a cosmic wonder. You're living, Lyra, he said, his voice gentle yet certain. Right now, right here, you're alive. She turned to him, her silver eyes shimmering under the supernova's light, like twin stars reflecting hope. And if I want to feel it? She asked, her voice low, almost trembling. Not through memories, not through others' words, but through myself? Cale didn't answer with words. He raised his hand, fingers threading through her glossy black hair, gentle as if touching a priceless relic. She didn't pull away but leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, their breaths entwining. For the first time, she let herself be close without fear, her invisible armor falling away. They sat in the station's ethereal glow, needing no further words, as if the universe had stilled to witness their moment. But peace, like all precious things in the cosmos, was fleeting. One morning, as Cale checked the radar, an abrupt signal sliced through the data stream, a blade piercing the screen. Not a drone, not a Zanari ship, but an encrypted pulse, sharp and complex, bearing the Human Alliance's mark, an organization Cale had once served but abandoned after a failed mission that left scars he couldn't heal. Lyra. He called, his voice taut, a string stretched to breaking. We have company. She emerged from the hydroponic bay, hands dusted with soil, her silver eyes flashing with alertness. Zanari? She asked, her voice low but sharp. No, Cale said, eyes fixed on the screen as the signal clarified. Humans. But I'm not sure they're friends. They concealed themselves in the station's shadows, watching through surveillance feeds. A small ship landed kilometers away, kicking up clouds of rocky dust under its thrusters. 3 figures emerged, clad in tight combat gear, weapons glinting in the planet's dim light. One, a woman with short, fiery red hair, stepped forward, staring into the camera as if sensing Cale's gaze. Her face was sharp, her eyes resolute yet unsettling. Cale Varn. Her voice crackled through the comms, crisp and unyielding. We know you're there. We're not here to fight. But we need to talk. Lyra gripped Cale's hand, her fingers tightening, her eyes tense. You know them? She asked, her voice low, braced for conflict. Cale nodded, his gaze shadowed by the past. Alliance bounty hunters. He said, his voice heavy. I worked with them, before things changed. Before what? Lyra pressed, her eyes piercing, as if cutting through his defenses. Cale met her gaze, his eyes dark as a starless sky. Before I let a girl die on a mission, he said, his voice low, carrying a weight she felt in her bones. They don't forgive failure. Neither do I. The woman on the screen continued, her voice cold yet persuasive. Cale, we know you're shielding a Zanari specimen. The Council's put a price on her. We don't work for them. The Alliance wants her, alive. She has something we need. Lyra's grip tightened, her eyes flashing with fear and fury. What? She demanded, her voice trembling with anger, as if weary of being a tool. Cale didn't answer immediately. He switched on the comms, his voice icy. Be clear, Mara. What do you want with her? Mara, the red-haired woman, smiled coldly, her eyes never leaving the camera. She's the key, she said. Her Zanari DNA holds genetic code that could save millions. A virus is spreading through human colonies, and she carries natural antibodies. Hand her over, and we guarantee safety for both of you. Cale cut the comms, turning to Lyra, his eyes blazing. They're lying, he said, his voice low but certain. The Alliance never keeps promises. They want you for their gain, not humanity's. Lyra stared at him, her eyes a storm of fear and rage. They want me because I'm a tool, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. Once again, I'm just something to use. Cale seized her shoulders, his gaze fierce, as if challenging the cosmos itself. You're not a tool, he said, his voice a vow. You're Lyra, and I won't let them touch you. But before they could plan, a deafening explosion rocked the station's northern sector, a hammer blow to the chest. Not from Mara's team, but something fiercer, more terrifying. A Zanari ship, larger, its metallic hull gleaming like a predator's hide, had landed. The Council had found them. And this time, they hadn't sent drones, they'd sent hunters. Cale pulled Lyra into a maintenance tunnel, the air hot and heavy with the stench of burning metal, like a dying machine's breath. They ran, the hunters' footsteps echoing behind, cold and rhythmic, like the drums of a relentless army. Kale activated a jammer, a small metal sphere emitting electromagnetic waves scrambling the pursuer's sensors, but he knew it was only a delay. "We need the engineering bay," he said, his voice tense but controlled. "There's an old patrol ship there. If we're lucky, it still works." Lyra nodded, her eyes blazing with newfound resolve, a fire freshly kindled. "If we must fight," she said, her voice steady, without hesitation. "I want to fight with you." Kale paused, just for a moment, his gaze locking onto hers. "You don't have to fight," he said, his voice soft but laced with concern. "I want to," she replied, her eyes unflinching. "I've run my whole life. Now I want to stand, even if it's just once." They reached the engineering bay, a vast chamber with rust-covered metal walls, where an ancient patrol ship lay dormant, a beast asleep in shadow. Kale rushed to the controls, his hands moving swiftly, coaxing the engines to life. But a figure appeared at the door, interrupting his focus, not a Zanari hunter, but Mara, the Alliance woman. She stood, gun in hand but not aimed, her eyes sharp yet not hostile. "Kale," Mara said, her voice low, urgent. "Listen. The Zanari are coming. We can help you escape, but she comes with us." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes burning, fearless. "I'm not going anywhere," she declared, her voice a challenge, as if facing the entire galaxy. Mara frowned, her gaze assessing Lyra. But before she could respond, another explosion shook the station, metal clashing like a symphony of destruction. The Zanari hunters had breached the doors. Kale shoved Lyra behind him, triggering an electric pulse device, a surge of energy felling one hunter, its metal frame collapsing. But three more advanced, swift and ghostly, programmed for slaughter. In the chaos, Mara fired at a Zanari hunter, her bullet piercing its armor, toppling it. "Run, Kale!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the blasts. "I'm not with them, but I can't hold them long." Kale didn't trust her, but time for debate was gone. He pulled Lyra onto the ship, diving to the controls, starting the engines. As the ship shuddered, preparing to launch, a truth sliced through the darkness like a blade. Mara wasn't the enemy. She genuinely wanted to save Lyra, but not out of altruism. Lyra's DNA didn't just hold antibodies. It was the key to an ancient bioweapon hidden in the galaxy, capable of annihilating entire systems. The Alliance sought to control it, but Mara, driven by a past of loss she never shared, had betrayed them. Kale and Lyra's ship surged into the void, engines roaring defiance at their pursuers. In the cramped cockpit, Lyra touched Kale's hand, her cold fingers strong, not seeking comfort but sharing strength. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said, her voice a proclamation, her silver eyes radiant. "Because I have you." The patrol ship glided through clouds of cosmic dust, each particle glinting like forgotten memories, reflecting light from a distant nebula. Streaks of orange and purple slid across the ship's weathered hull, like brushstrokes from an unseen artist, adorning the old vessel as it plunged into the dark. In the cramped cockpit, Kale sat at the controls, his hands moving with the precision of one accustomed to journeys without destinations. He adjusted the course, steering toward an abandoned asteroid cluster, where massive rocks drifted in silence, like tombs of a vanished civilization. He hoped this place would mask their signal, buying enough time to plan their next move. Lyra sat beside him, bare feet propped on the seat's edge, her silver eyes no longer sharp with the vigilance Kale had seen on Kale's 7. Instead, they held a newfound stillness, like a frozen lake after a storm, reflecting a part of herself she'd only begun to reclaim. She gazed through the viewport, where stars twinkled like unfulfilled promises. "Do you think Mara was telling the truth?" she asked, her voice low, laced with curiosity and doubt. Kale shook his head, his eyes fixed on the control screen, where numbers and data curves danced. "She told a partial truth," he replied, his voice steady and certain. "Your DNA is valuable, but not for noble reasons. The Human Alliance doesn't save people. They use them, turning them into tools for their own ends." Lyra turned away, her gaze lost in the endless dark beyond the viewport, as if seeking answers in the universe's silence. I used to think my body was useless, she said, her voice tinged with bitterness but laced with wry irony. Now everyone wants it, Zanari, the Alliance, even Mara. Ironic, isn't it? Kale gave a faint smile, gentle but resolute, his eyes shifting from the screen to meet hers. Not your body, he said, his voice a declaration. You. They don't see it, but I do. She turned to him, her silver eyes shimmering in the cockpit's dim glow, like twin stars reflecting hope. But you see, she whispered, her voice fading into the air. In that moment, she wasn't a specimen, not a number, but Lyra, a complete being, with her scars and strength. He didn't respond with words. Instead, he took her hand, their fingers interlocking like the final pieces of an unfinished mosaic. The touch was more than physical. It was an unspoken vow that they would face any darkness together. Time seemed to pause, the engine's hum and the hiss of air fading, leaving only the rhythm of two hearts beating as one. But the peace shattered as a new signal, sharp and alarming, flared on the radar, a blade slicing through the night. A Zanari ship, larger, faster, pursued them with the relentless hunger of a predator. They landed on a massive asteroid, its rugged surface riddled with natural metallic caves, remnants of a failed mining project centuries old. The rocks gleamed with a metallic sheen, like the hide of an ancient beast, reflecting faint nebula light. Kale led Lyra into a deep cave, where darkness enveloped them like a cold shroud, broken only by the pale blue glow of his scanning device. They sat close on the icy stone floor, their breaths mingling, forming faint wisps of vapor. Kale checked the scanner, his eyes tense as data streamed in. The Zanari ship was sweeping the cluster, its sensors gliding over the asteroids like invisible nets. Something was wrong. The ship's signal bore not only Zanari markers but also an encrypted human alliance code. An uneasy alliance between enemies, like two predators joining forces to hunt a shared prey. Lyra. Kale cursed under his breath, his hand tightening on the scanner, as if he could crush the threat with sheer will. We can't keep running, Lyra said, her voice resolute, ringing like a proclamation in the dark. She stood, her silver eyes blazing, no longer those of a hunted specimen but of a warrior ready to face her fate. I want to confront them. Kale looked at her, his eyes filled with worry but also pride. Lyra, he said, his voice low, almost pleading. They outnumber us. We need time to plan. I'm out of time, she replied, her gaze unwavering, a flame that couldn't be extinguished. I've lived my life in a cage, measured, judged, deemed a mistake. If I must die, I want to die standing as myself. Kale rose, grasping her shoulders, his eyes locked on hers, as if pouring his strength into her. You won't die, he said, his voice a vow. Not today, not while I'm here. She smiled, the first time he'd seen it, radiant, not bitter or guarded, like a star igniting in the dark. Then fight with me, she said, her voice light but unyielding. They set a trap in the cave, using Kale's old gear, electromagnetic pulse orbs and jammers, to create a disruption field, scrambling the enemy's sensors. Kale hacked the asteroid's ancient communication system, activating dormant sensors to project false signals, making it seem they were everywhere. Lyra, with her Zanari tech knowledge, fine-tuned the devices, her eyes focused, as if rewriting her own destiny. As the Zanari Alliance ship landed, dust erupting under its thrusters, Kale and Lyra hid in the cave's shadows, their breaths soft but tense. But an unexpected figure emerged, not as an enemy but an uneasy ally, Mara. She stepped into the cave, her red hair glowing under the scanner's faint light, her eyes resolute yet scarred. Kale, Lyra, she said, her voice low and urgent. I'm done with the Alliance. I can't let them have her. Kale gripped his pulse device, his eyes wary. Why should we trust you? He asked, his voice icy. Mara met his gaze, unflinching. Because the Alliance took my family, she said, her voice trembling, as if tearing open an old wound. They promised protection but sacrificed us for their gain. The bioweapon they want to activate isn't for humanity's safety. It'll destroy the Zanari and any species that defies them. I want to stop it. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes sharp but not hostile. And I'm the key, she said, her voice low, confronting her own fate. Mara nodded. But not the way they think. Before they could continue, the roar of engines echoed, and Zanari hunters and Alliance mercenaries stormed the cave. Battle erupted, fierce and unrelenting. Kale wielded his combat skills and hacking prowess, triggering pulse orbs to disable drones and Zanari hunters. Lyra, swift and resolute, used her Zanari technology to blind enemy sensors, turning them into aimless machines. Mara provided firepower, her gun blazing with deadly precision, each shot a declaration of her betrayal. Amid the chaos, Lyra was wounded, a Zanari hunter's metal blade slicing deep into her shoulder, blue blood shimmering in the dim light. She screamed, not in pain but fury at those who'd tried to erase her, to reduce her to a number. Seizing a metal rod from the debris, she drove it into a drone sensor, sparking an explosion of fire and light. When the battle ended, the cave fell silent, save for the labored breaths of Kale, Lyra, and Mara amid the wreckage. The enemy ship was destroyed, metal husks and mercenary bodies strewn across the stone. Mara, panting, revealed the final truth, a gem buried in shadow. Lyra's DNA didn't just hold antibodies, it was the key to an ancient AI hidden in the asteroids, capable of rewriting any species' genetic code, crafting a perfect universe per the Alliance's vision, one with no place for those like Lyra. Mara wanted to destroy it, her eyes fierce. "It's too dangerous," she said. But Lyra shook her head, her gaze trembling yet resolute, a flame unquenchable. "I want to use it," she declared, her voice a proclamation. "Not for perfection, not for destruction, but to give everyone a chance to be themselves." Kale looked at her, pride flooding his eyes, as if witnessing a star's birth. "You want to change the game," he said, his voice soft but powerful. She nodded, her silver eyes radiant. "I want the universe to know no one is a mistake." They ventured deeper into the cave, to a hidden chamber where the ancient AI lay dormant, a colossal metal machine glinting like a sleeping god's heart. Kale hacked its systems, his hands swift, while Lyra placed her hand on the control panel, her DNA interfacing with the machine, rousing it from millennia of slumber. Mara stood guard, gun in hand, her eyes vigilant yet hopeful. The AI wasn't a destroyer. It sensed Lyra's intent, her resilience, her hunger for freedom. Instead of rewriting genomes, it broadcast a message across the galaxy, piercing every frequency, bypassing Zanari and Alliance controls. The message was a call to freedom, a declaration that every being had the right to exist, that no one was a mistake, that a being's worth lay not in numbers or standards but in their will and heart. As the message spread, Zanari systems trembled, Alliance signals scrambled. The AI completed its task, its light fading like a star dimming after its purpose was fulfilled. Kale and Lyra left the asteroid, returning to their ship, leaving Mara behind. She chose to stay, ensuring the AI wouldn't fall into wrong hands. "This is my redemption," Mara said, her eyes holding a peace she'd never known. As the ship soared into space, Lyra leaned against Kale, her eyes on the stars, twinkling like new dreams. "I used to think I belonged nowhere," she said, her voice soft, a whisper to the cosmos. "Now I know I belong to myself." Kale kissed her forehead, gentle yet certain, a timeless vow. "And I belong to you," he said, his voice a heartbeat entwining with hers, amidst the endless dark of the universe. The new station Kale and Lyra found perched precariously at the edge of a distant nebula, where turquoise and pink light wove together, like cosmic silk threading through infinite dark. The nebula, with its shimmering dust clouds, was a living canvas no hand had touched, a reminder that the universe, though cold, held wonders for those who dared to dream. Smaller than Kale 7, the station lacked the grim austerity of its predecessor's metal corridors, instead exuding warmth and intimacy, a haven built from fragments of hope. Its metal walls, coated in artificial moss, glowed softly, like the breath of a living thing, pulsing with the rhythm of a heart. Kale spent weeks repairing the heating system, transforming the frigid air into a gentle warmth, enough to banish the bone-deep chill of space. He worked with an archivist's patience, not merely fixing machinery but crafting a place to call home. Lyra, with skills honed on the Black Station, tended hydroponic beds, where tiny green sprouts rose from synthetic soil, bringing color to the metal's monotony. Pale purple flowers, delicate yet vibrant, began to bloom, each petal a vivid memory of the silver-haired woman's whisper that Lyra was still alive. These flowers weren't mere plants. They were emblems of rebirth, of a Lyra no longer defined by numbers or verdicts. They rarely spoke of the asteroid, the brutal battle, or the ancient AI that broadcast Lyra's message across the galaxy. That message, a fire blazing through darkness, had shaken the pillars of power. The Zenari Council, with its ruthless standards, crumbled in chaos, its scientists and breeders stripped of their authority to dictate fates. The Human Alliance, exposed for its ambitions, plunged into crisis, its colonies erupting in uprisings for freedom. Across the galaxy, those deemed mistakes, specimens, outcasts, forgotten souls, rose, raising banners for their right to live, to be themselves. But for Kale and Lyra, true victory lay not in galactic upheavals, not in fallen systems or revolutions. It was here, in this small station, in the quiet moments they shared. Lyra's soft laugh as she learned to sow seeds, Kale's tender glance as he fixed the circuit, pride unspoken. The times they sat together under the nebula's glow, words unnecessary, their presence filling every void. One morning, as turquoise nebula light flooded through the window, casting an ethereal sheen across the station, Lyra stood, one hand resting lightly on the cold viewport. She gazed out, where cosmic dust swirled in an endless dance. Her other hand drifted to her abdomen, sensing a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, yet enough to quicken her heart. A new rhythm, faint but fierce, a promise of life. She turned, her silver eyes gleaming, and saw Kale working in the corner, tinkering with an old circuit board, his hair tousled, hands smudged with grease. "Kale," she called, her voice soft but clear, a note in the stillness. He looked up, a smile breaking across his angular face, his deep blue eyes alight. "What's up, Supreme Commander?" he teased, a playful lilt in his voice, as he often did to coax her smile. She shook her head, a faint smile curving her lips, but her eyes held a gravity he instantly sensed. She stepped toward him, standing before him, and drew a deep breath, as if preparing to unveil a cosmic secret. I'm pregnant," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, each word carrying unshakable strength. Kale froze, his fingers stalling midair, the circuit board slipping to the floor with a soft clatter. He stared at her, his eyes flickering between awe and profound joy, as if witnessing a star's birth. He rose, closing the distance, and this time, no analytical lenses, no neural interfaces stood between them, just him, a human scarred by the past, and her, once called a mistake, now hope incarnate. He knelt before her, placing his calloused hand on her abdomen, gentle as if touching a miracle the galaxy couldn't define. "You were never a mistake," he whispered, his voice trembling yet resolute. "And neither is this child." Lyra placed her hand over his, her cold fingers warmed by their bond. Her silver eyes blazed, like stars mirroring the future. "She'll grow up under stars that don't judge," she said, her voice a vow, not just for the child but for the universe. "She'll know her worth lies not in numbers but in her heart and will." They stood there, bathed in the nebula's turquoise and pink glow, two hearts beating as one, joined by the faint pulse of new life. Beyond, the universe spun on, with its wars, ambitions, and unformed dreams. But in this small station, Kale and Lyra had found a new beginning, a world where no one was defined by imposed standards, where love and hope were the brightest stars guiding the way. They didn't know what the future held, whether old powers would rise or new challenges emerge. But they knew, no matter how vast or cold the universe, they would face it together, with their child, a living symbol of freedom and humanity's strength, of beings who dared stand and declare, "We belong to ourselves." Dear traveler among the stars, as the turquoise and pink light of the nebula fades, as Kale and Lyra's ship glides into the darkness of a new dawn, I hope their story has left a spark in you, a glimmering fragment of memory, like cosmic dust. Their journey, from Kale 7's frigid corridors to the asteroid's metallic caves, was more than a battle against forces seeking to define them by numbers. It was a song of freedom, of the power to see and be seen, of love blooming between two souls who once thought they belonged nowhere. At its heart, this tale asks, what makes a life worthy? For Lyra, it was the path from a specimen labeled mistake to a mother and leader who rewrote the galaxy's rules. For Kale, it was redemption, finding purpose and protecting someone not with might but with heart. The lesson is clear. Our worth lies not in imposed standards but in the courage to rise, to love, to believe each of us deserves a place beneath the stars. You, dear reader, are part of this story. As you turn the final page, I ask, did Lyra's unyielding spirit stir you? Did Kale's quiet goodness convince you kindness can thrive in darkness? Did their cry for freedom move you, or was there a moment that made you pause, reflect? Your thoughts are my guiding light, shaping the stories and universes yet to come. Like Kale and Lyra, we, storyteller and reader, forge a bond, a shared heartbeat across souls. Share your feelings, whether a whisper or a shout, so we may paint new stars together. And who knows? In the nebulous shadows, another tale may await your discovery.